Welcome to Excel and Business Math video number 1. Hey, in this video, we want to see an introduction to Excel, see why we use Excel for math, and we'll see our first formula. Here's all the topics we're going to see in this video, and we're going to see things like learn exactly what Excel does, learn how to navigate through a large workbook, see how to create our very first formula, and talk about the ever important number formatting. Now, before we can get busy having fun with Excel and math, we got to go to our class website. Here's the website I have built for all my classes. Here's the address up here, people.highline.edu/mgirvin. These are all the classes that I teach. This is our class, Business 135. Now, this link up here is the extended link that gets you straight to Business 135. This is the link that's listed in the syllabus, sent out in the introductory email, and so on. Down here are the different sections of our class, videos, files, and handouts. We're going to go to Introduction to Excel. Now, here's the first video. There's no link for the video because I'm shooting it right now, but we definitely have our start file and our handout file, and we need to download these. Now, before we can download these, you have to put your jump drive in. Now, if you have a laptop or a designated computer at home, because you're doing this as an online class, you can set up your folder, which we'll do in a second, on one of those. But if you're in the classroom where you're going to be moving between computers, you got to get a jump drive. That's one of the requirements in the syllabus. All right, I've already plugged in my jump drive. Now we got to see how to download these files. And guess what? The browser that I'm using to go to this website is Chrome. There's also Internet Explorer and Mozilla. Now, depending on which browser you're using, when we come to the file and right-click that link, notice I'm in Chrome, so it says Save Link As. Now, I'm going to open up Internet Explorer and show you that it's different in Internet Explorer. Here I am in Internet Explorer. If you right-click, you're going to see a completely different drop-down. You want to use Save Target As. If you have Mozilla, in Mozilla, when we right-click the file we want to download, it'll say Save Link As. Now, my suggestion is, as I close all these browsers, is to use Chrome. That's what I'm going to be using. All right, now watch this. Right-click and point to Save Link As. Now, notice it brings up the Save As dialog box. That's very important because Save As allows us to choose a destination for the file and the name of the file. Now, I've already plugged in my jump drive, so I'm going to select it on the left. Now, for this class, inside your drive or on your hard drive at home or your laptop, you need to create a folder and save all the files. The Excel files with all the Excel and math examples and the PDF notes, that's our free book for this class, are going to become important for studying for tests and quizzes. And so we're going to create a folder. You can use the New Folder button here. Some of you might not see a New Folder button. So the universal way to create a folder inside your drive is to use the keyboard Ctrl-Shift-N. Now, make sure it's selected on the left, and then use Ctrl-Shift-N. Just like that, it's totally polite. It highlights the text in blue and allows you to create a smart name for this folder. Now, notice it's blue. I do not need to hit delete. I just type Business Math. Now I have my folder name. I hit Enter. Now, to open this up and save this file inside of that folder, I'm going to hit Enter again. I can see the file path up here. If I want to see the full file path, I come over to the left. I click the triangle, or you might have a plus or a minus, and then I select on the left Business Math. Now, here's our first Excel file that we're going to download. We're going to use this while watching the video, so I'm going to click Save. I'm going to come over to the PDF, right-click, Save Link As. It already knows the path. I'm going to come over and click Save. Now, I want to teach you how to use Windows Explorer to find that folder we created and find all the files we downloaded. We're going to use a keyboard. You're going to have to find the window key on your keyboard. If you can't find the window key because you're using a Mac, you have the wrong computer. You got to go rewatch the introductory video and reread the syllabus because we're not allowed to use a Mac in this class. Now I'm going to use the keyboard to open up Windows Explorer, Window E. On the left, there's all the drives and locations. I'm going to click the triangle to open up my jump drive and select Business Math. Because I've selected it on the left, I can see everything on the right that's inside that folder. Now I'm going to use Windows Explorer here to open up our Excel file. I'm going to double click to open that. Now over here in Excel, our next topic is we want to talk about why we use Excel for business math. Now I want to come down to this blue worksheet called Why Excel and click on Why Excel. So why do we use Excel for business math? 1, 2, 3 reasons. Now the first reason is your job will require it. So if you're given a column of gross pay for each one of the employees and tax deduction, you do not want to calculate the net pay by taking out a handheld calculator and taking gross pay minus tax deduction, writing it down. Gross pay minus tax deduction, writing it down. You want to do this in Excel by simply creating a single calculation or formula and copying it down the column. Now, we'll talk about our first formula a couple minutes ahead in the video, but I'm just going to show you why we have to use Excel when we're doing math calculations like this. I simply create my formula, gross pay minus tax deduction, and then I copy it down the column. Just like that, less than 5 seconds, I've made all those calculations. So first reason we have to learn Excel for business math is your job will require it. Our second example is, we just illustrated it here, we can make many calculations quickly. The third awesome example of why we have to use Excel is sometimes Excel will help make a complicated calculation much easier. Now in the finance section of this class, we'll see this example. We have number of years until retirement, number of months in each year, our annual rate, the amount of money we're going to deposit each month, and then there's our monthly interest rate and total months. And instead of doing the complicated yet beautiful finance math to calculate what your pension value will be, luckily Excel has some built-in functions. And they have a great function called future value. And all you have to put in is the monthly rate, the actual total number of months, and the amount you put in each month. And just like that, it'll calculate the future value of your pension using a built-in function. Now, I only listed 1, 2, 3 reasons that we need to use Excel for business math. There's actually a fourth reason, and this is actually the original reason that the inventors of the spreadsheet, Bricklin and Frankston, thought of when they invented the spreadsheet, and that is what-if analysis. We need to be able to change a formula input, and the answer will instantly update. So notice we calculated our future value of our pension, but instead of 35 years, what if we change this formula input to 40 years? Now, later we'll see how to do this example. This formula is actually calculating total number of months, which is 12 times 35. But what happens if I change this? I'm going to select the cell, type 40, and before I hit Enter, watch what happens down here. As soon as I hit Enter, everything updates. That means, yes, in terms of finance, invest 5 years earlier, and that's the difference between $600,000 and $1 million when you retire. So we have 4 reasons why we're going to always use Excel for business math. Your job will require it. We can make many calculations quickly, complicated calculations much easier, and then what-if analysis. All right, now we want to go over to the sheet Conventions, and I'm going to click on Conventions. And we want to talk about the color coding conventions that I'll use for this class. Now, we're going to have yellow, blue, red, and black worksheet tabs. The yellow tabs will be notes or have information. The blue sheets like first formula, that's where we're going to do our work. So in just a moment, we'll come over to this blue sheet first formula and build our formula. Now, since I'm shooting a video and I'm going to show you how to create this formula, after the video is done, I'm always going to have a red sheet right next to it that says answer that will show you the completed example that has everything we did in the video. Now, there'll also be black sheets. And if I click on this black sheet, there's nothing there. The black sheet with homework and an arrow means after this sheet will be the homework problems. Now, notice this is called the scroll bar. You can actually use this to scroll the sheet. But we want to get to the sheets over here. Now, I could click on this, but look over to the left. There are some scroll arrows for our sheets. If I click on the scroll arrow, it moves the sheets. And you can see the same sheet is still selected. That's the black homework one. And I can scroll and see all of the homework problems. Now, when you get to the homeworks, the black one will mean after that sheet are the homework problems. The blue ones, that's where you'll do your work. The yellow cells at the top will always have the instructions. You read the instructions and do your homework problem. After you're done doing the homework problem, you can go and look at the answer, which is on the red sheet. Blue means you work here. Red means that's the answer. Now, homework and video projects are not handed in for points towards your grade. You know that from the introductory video. So it makes sense that I would give you the answer to all the homework problems. The homework problems, as we talked about in the introductory video, are for you to practice for the test and the quizzes. Now, I want to use my scroll arrows for the sheets, and I want to go back. I'm exposing more sheets here. I want to go back to the convention sheet. So that's how the sheet tab coloring will work. I'll also use fill and font color for different cells in the Excel worksheet here. The blue one means those are going to be labels at the top of the columns, or they'll be labels for our formula inputs. This is a formula input. That minus 100, that's the amount we deposit each month. That is being used by our formulas down here. Anytime we have a formula input or even some raw data that we typed in, those cells won't have any fill color. Now notice, this is where we create our formula. Those cells will always be green. So here's the color coding for the sheets. Blue means a label. Yellow means some sort of instructions for homework or a testing. Green means that's a formula. Now, before we formally talk about how an Excel sheet is laid out, I have one more task. I want to go over to the sheet, what Excel does. Now, Excel can do three basic things. It can store raw data, like a name of somebody and the sales amount, name, sales amount. We can also make calculations. That's what we're going to be doing in this class. So we're going to see a lot of green cells and white cells with our formula inputs. Now, there's one other major thing that Excel does, and we don't get to do a lot of it in this class since it's a business math class, and we're going to be making mostly calculations. Excel is great at performing data analysis, and all that means is converting raw data into some useful information. Here we have a column of sales, reps, and sales, and we summarized it, making a summary report where we get the total for each one of the sales reps. Only a very small amount of data analysis in this class. Most of the time, we're going to be making calculations, and almost all of them will be math calculations. All right, so that's what Excel does. We can store raw data, make calculations, and perform data analysis. Now, we need to go over to the yellow sheet Excel layout and talk about how a sheet is laid out. Now, notice I have this big red column and yellow row, and the intersecting cell is orange. Columns are represented by letters. This is the F column. This is the G column. Rows are represented by numbers. That's the 13th row. That's the 15th row. And a cell, that's the intersection of a column and a row. The name of that cell is D13. Now, any cell that you can click in, you can look up. This is called the formula bar. Later in our next example, we'll see that our formula will appear up in the formula bar. But over to the left, that's called the name box. You can actually hover your cursor, and it says name box in the screen tip. It tells you what cell you're in, D13. Any cell I click in, that's the intersection of a column and a row. It says C, that's the column. 6, that's the row. Now, that'll become important when we create our formulas and use cell references. But that's how Excel's laid out. Columns are letters. Rows are numbers. Cell is the intersection of a column and a row. Now, worksheets. You already heard me refer to this as a worksheet tab, or that's the name of the worksheet. Well, a worksheet is all the cells. Every single cell here, and there's about 17 billion of them in this one sheet. All the cells make up a worksheet. Down here, that's the name of this worksheet, Excel layout. If I click on first formula is the name of all these cells, which is our worksheet. Now, this tab down here is called a worksheet tab. And that's where we put our name. And we can add color or rename it. You can actually double click to name and then hit enter. If you want to color them, you can right click tab color. Later, a couple videos ahead, we'll actually have to create a blank Excel workbook, and we'll do that. Now, don't forget, worksheet, that's all the cells. Hey, but what about all of these worksheets? What are all these worksheets together? They're called a workbook. Now, the workbook has a name, and it's up in the title bar up here. The name of this workbook, which is all the sheets, is called Excel Business Math 01 Intro to Excel. And don't mix that up. All the sheets are called a workbook. The sheet itself is called a worksheet. Now, most of the time, we refer to a worksheet as just a sheet. Now, we saw how to move between the sheets. We can either use our cursor and click on each sheet, or we can move the actual sheets. We're not moving the active sheet, but we can move and expose sheets by using the scroll arrows for our sheet. Notice it doesn't move the sheet. It just exposes more sheets. But I got to show you an awesome trick, because in this class, we'll have lots of workbooks with lots of worksheets. And I want to be able to quickly jump to any worksheet in this workbook. And it's simple. You come over to the arrows, and all you have to do is right click. And when you right click, those little arrows right there, the Activate dialog box comes up. I don't know why they called it Activate. It means when you click on it, it will activate it. But they should have called it something like Worksheet List or something. But now watch this. I can click on Homework 3, click OK, and instantly I jump to Homework 3. I can come over and right-click and go all the way back to Why Excel, click OK. And so that's the fastest way to jump between the sheets. Now I want to come back over to Excel layout. We want to talk about a couple last details about the layout of Excel. Now down here, this is called the status bar down here. And we can jump between views. We're never going to jump between views. We're always going to stay in normal view. But down here is a zoom bar. And you could see there's a slide bar, and it says 160. I'm actually going to click in cell A1. And we can use the scroll bar here to zoom in and out. And all it does is change the view on our worksheet. It doesn't change how it's going to print out or anything. It's just how big or small our view is on the screen. So you can also click in the zoom bar. Now, I don't use that zoom bar down there in the status bar. I like to use the keyboard. And I'm going to use a combination keyboard and mouse, holding Control and rolling the wheel on my mouse. When I roll the wheel down, it zooms out. When I roll the wheel up, it zooms in. Now, two more things we have to talk about. We want to talk about what this is. That's the View Ribbon tab. If I click on Formulas, that's the Formula Ribbon tab. If I click on the Home Ribbon tab, in the Home Ribbon tab, there's lots of commands we can use. We can add fill color, font color. Very important group. We'll use this all the time. The number formatting group. The clipboard group for copy the format only using the Format Painter. So ribbon tabs will give us a different set of commands. I'm going to go back to the Home Ribbon tab. Now, above the ribbon tabs, this is called the Quick Access Toolbar, or QAT. We're never going to use this because save, forget it. We're using the keyboard Control-S. Undo, we're never using that. We're using Control-Z. We're going to be using save and undo 10, 20 times every video. So instead of wasting our time of dragging our mouse up here, it's much faster to use the keyboard. In fact, in a couple videos ahead, I'll have a whole video about keyboards. All right, so we're not going to use the QAT, but we will use the ribbon tab to get different commands. All right, now we want to go and see how to create our first formula. I'm going to go to the sheet First Formulas. Now, here's our first math equation, math calculation, math formula we're going to do. We're going to calculate total sales by taking price times number of units. We have 3 columns. The product, which happens to be a boomerang that we sold. We have the sunset, the flat top, the flying eagle, boomerang products. Here's the price, $21.95 for sunset, $29.95 for flat top. And here's the number of units sold for each row or each product. And our goal is to calculate one formula and copy it down. Again, this is an example where we'd never take out a handheld calculator and do this. Now, how do we create formulas? They are not hard. But we do need to know the special character that we have to type as the first character in the cell to tell Excel this is a formula. And that's the equal sign. If you look to the left of the backspace, you'll find the equal sign. I'm going to type equal sign. Now, in my formula, I need to refer to price times number of units. And there's 2 ways that we insert into our formula the name of the cell. The first way is by using the arrow keys. I'm going to look on my navigation pad, or if you have a laptop or something else, you have to find your arrow keys. All right, I'm going to use my left arrow to get price. And look at that. The dancing ants are marching around the cell that now is in our formula. Now, once you put the name of a cell into a formula, it's actually called a cell reference. My formula is referring to the cell B2. Now, the dancing ants are very important because if you accidentally go too far, well, that's not going to work at all because you can't take a word times a number of units. But luckily, if the dancing ants are moving, you can simply back arrow. And in fact, I can down arrow, up arrow, whichever direction I want. When I finally get to the cell I want, then I stop. Now I have my first cell reference. Now I need to multiply the price times the number of units. Asterisk is the symbol we use in Excel for multiplying. You either use the asterisk on your number pad or you use Shift 8. Now I'm using the asterisk on my number pad. There it is, equal sign, cell reference, times. And now I'm going to show you the second way to put a cell reference in. You can actually take your mouse and click, click. Remember, the dancing ants are totally moving, so I'm still in full edit mode. I can even switch between the mouse, and now I can use my arrow keys. Now I have my formula. Now, when you're deciding between whether or not to use your mouse or your arrow keys, the rule is simple. When the cell references are close, use your arrow keys because it's faster. If the cell reference is way over here, which it is sometimes, then it's faster to use your mouse. Now we have our formula equals price times number of units. I need to enter it and copy it down. Now, since my goal is to put the formula in the cell, keep the cell selected, and then copy it down, I'm going to use Control Enter. Control Enter puts the formula in the cell and keeps the cell selected. And there, it gives us our answer, $109.75. Now, we can see the result in cell D2, but look at this. Up in the formula bar, we can still see our formula. Now, I need to copy the formula down. Look at the selected cell. That little green box in the lower right-hand corner, that's called the fill handle. If I move my cursor close, that cursor right there is called the selection cursor. That's not what we use when we're copying a formula. That cursor right there is called the move cursor. That's not what we use when we're copying a formula. You actually have to take your cursor and hover right over the fill handle, and that's the magic cursor in Excel. Now, it has a special name. It has one that Bill Gates gave it and one that we're going to use. Bill Gates called this the crosshair, like on a gun. I like to call it, instead of a crosshair, I like to call it an angry rabbit. So you take your cursor, hover it on top of the fill handle. When you see your angry rabbit, you double click and send it down. Now, what is that? That's amazing. It automatically copied it down. Now, it knew to copy all the way down because when it got to a row where there was no record or no product price number, it knew to stop one row above. That is absolutely amazing how fast we can make all those calculations. Now, anytime we copy a formula through a range of cells, and this is called a range of cells, that's range D2 all the way to D19. But anytime we copy a formula, we have to go to the last cell, click in the last cell, and use the keyboard F2 to put it back in edit mode because we want to verify that the cell references are pointing to the correct formula inputs. We need to verify, is that the correct price? Yes, it is. Is that the correct number of units? Yes, it is. Now, I'm going to hit Enter. And I want to go back to the top cell, hit F2, and notice if we were to read this cell, we might be tempted to read it, hey, equal sign B2 times C2. But if I hit Enter and hit F2 again to put it in edit mode, well, that doesn't say B2, C2. It says B3, C3. Enter F2. That's really amazing. That means as we copy the formula down, enter F2, the two cell references will always look relatively from where our formula is, two cells to the left to get price, and one cell to the left to get number of units sold. Enter F2, enter F2. You can see as we copy it down, the blue cell and orange cell always automatically are looking at the correct two numbers in the given row. Now, there's a special name for this type of cell reference that as we copy it down, it moves with the copy formula. These are called relative cell references. That means from the formula's point of view, where am I going to look relative to the formula? Well, this formula is always going to look 2 cells to the left times 1 cell to the left. Those are called relative cell references. Now I want to hit Enter, and I want to use my selection cursor to highlight the whole column. So I'm not going to use, when I'm selecting cells, I'm not going to use the Move cursor, because if I accidentally use the Move cursor, it moves it, and I don't want that. Now remember what we said. When we make a mistake, we're never going to go up here and click that. We're going to use the keyboard Control-Z to undo. And when we're selecting a range, we do not want to use the angry rabbit cursor. When we're selecting a range, either to format or delete or something like that, we use the selection cursor. That's the selection cursor. So right in the middle of cell D2, I click and drag. All I'm doing is highlighting. Now I could do whatever I want. I could format, delete. In our case, I want to delete the content. So I'm going to use the delete key to delete all the formulas. Now, the reason I did that is because I want to do this in high speed mode and just see how amazing this really is. Equal sign, left arrow, times on the number pad, left arrow, Control Enter, and double click and send it down. Go to the last cell, F2 to verify. All right, Enter. Now I want to scroll down to our second formula example, and we can use our vertical scroll bar to scroll down. We can see example 2 right here. I'm going to use the vertical scroll bar to scroll back up. We can also use the wheel on our mouse without the control key. So if I just use the wheel, that'll allow me to scroll down. And I'm going to scroll all the way up so I see example 2 right below A. A28. By the way, we can use the horizontal scroll arrow over here. And notice it looks like the spreadsheet starts at D28, but it really doesn't. It's just that we're not showing any rows above 28 or any columns before D. Now I'm going to use my horizontal scroll arrow here to scroll over so we see example 2. Now in example 2, we want to calculate net income, which is revenue minus expenses. But look at this. We have our calculation set up, so we want to create a formula and copy it to the side. January, February, March. For each month, we have the revenue amount and the expense amount. Now, before we calculate our formula, we want to talk about number formatting using the number group up here in the Home Ribbon tab. Now, I want to use my selection cursor and select B31 all the way to I31. Now, what I'd like to do is display the proper dollar sign for these dollar amounts, the proper comma separator, and decimals. Now, instead of typing dollar signs and decimals in, number formatting will do it automatically for us. So with this range selected, I'm going to come up to the number group, and in the dropdown, we have the most common different types of number formatting. And we want to choose currency. So I'm going to click on currency. And look at that. Just like that, it put the dollar signs, commas, and the decimal 00. That is very convenient when you're entering number data and it has a unit like dollars. Use number formatting because it will save a lot of time typing data in. Now, let's select B31 and see what we mean. If we're counting on our fingers, there are 11 characters that are displayed on top of the cell. But if we look up to the formula bar, we can actually see what's underneath the number formatting and the number that sits in the cell. It's actually only 6 characters. Now, if I click in the cell below, we can see up there, sure enough, it has 0.5, but down here we see the 0.50, the dollar sign, and the comma. Now, let's highlight this again, and let's do something different with number formatting. We have increased decimal and decreased decimal. Let's see what happens if we use the decreased decimal. Now, I want you to notice something. This is $76,178.50. So we see the $8.50 there. But let's see what happens to the displayed number when we decrease the decimals. Now, let's just click it once. It decreases the decimal 1. Let's click it again. And look at that. Now it is displaying a number that is different than what's in the cell. We know that underneath, if I click in the cell, that's the last 4 digits, 178.50. But here it's showing 179.50. So when we're using number formatting, we want to be careful to make sure and display the correct number of units. Before we do that, though, let's create our formula and learn how to copy to the side. Now, our net income is always going to be whatever the revenue is minus the expense. So I type in equal sign. I'm going to use my up arrow to get the revenue for this month, minus up arrow to get the expenses for this month. Now notice, these are going to be relative cell references, meaning as we copy to the side, we always want the blue one to look at the current month's revenue and then subtract the current month's expense. So I'm going to Control Enter. And we would like to simply hover our cursor and double click, but that trick only works when we're copying down. And there's data next to the column we're copying it down. So instead, we're going to take our cursor, hover it when we see our angry rabbit. We click, hold the click, and drag. I'm dragging to the side. Keep dragging all the way to I-33, and then let go. And just like that, we copied the formula to the side. Now, we still have to do our same rule for checking whether the formula is working. Click in the last cell and hit F2. That's working perfect. It's totally getting 1, 2 cells above minus 1 cell above. The proper August revenue minus August expense. Now I want to hit Enter. Now, if we're looking at number formatting, we got to be careful. We definitely want to increase the decimals to show the penny positions. And here's why. That answer is misleading. If someone comes and looks at this, they would say $110,404 minus $76,179 is not $34,226. Now, if you take exactly what you see on the surface of the worksheet and actually type it down here, 110404, 76,179. I have those two numbers and I make a formula equals up arrow minus up arrow. When I hit Enter, that's the correct answer. So no problem. We just have to be aware when we're using number formatting, don't decrease the decimals too few or have too many for that matter. Let's highlight the whole range and use the increase decimal button twice. And now everything's working fine. The number formatting helped us save lots of time typing, and our formula's working fine. All right, those are all the examples for this first video. Here's the homework sheet. You can go practice. There's a few homework problems for you to practice. Now I want to remind you, I'm back here in Windows Explorer. I have my Business Math folder selected. There's the PDF notes. If you double-click and open this up, these PDF notes are written and pictorial descriptions of what you see in the video. Not only that, but at the top of the PDF notes, there's a table of contents. You can choose any one of the topics. First Excel formula, click on it in the table of contents, and it will jump right to that section of the PDF notes. For some of the examples like this one, there'll be step-by-step written and pictorial descriptions of exactly what we did in the video. Also, if you go all the way to the end of the PDF notes, there's a list of all of the keyboard shortcuts. So if I go back to the top, PDF notes are intended to accompany the videos to help you learn how to have fun with math and Excel. Now I want to go back over to the Excel workbook. And in this video, we saw two formula examples. We saw how to do a net income formula, copy it to the side. We talked about number formatting for the first time. We saw how to calculate total sales and copy it down a column quickly. Back on the layout sheet, we talked all about the layout of Excel. We talked about on the what does Excel do. Excel stores raw data, makes calculations, and performs data analysis. Calculations is what we're going to do in this class. Over on conventions, we talked about the color coding conventions we're going to use in this class. Over on why we use Excel, well, we just saw with our formulas why we're going to use Excel. And in our next video, Excel Business number 2, we'll talk lots more about how to create formulas in Excel. All right, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun. We'll see you next video.